Recording in progress.
Good evening. Welcome to Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We are here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Luv Bay family, we are rising out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is domestic violence in the Jewish community. We have with us our co-host Jennifer Peterkin and Dr. Sandra Sterling Epstein. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. If you have any resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, or your faith-based organization, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And Jen, with that, would you like to greet our listeners first?
Yes, thank you so much for having me again, Tia. My name is Jen Peterkin. As Tia said, I am one of the co-hosts on Suffering in Silence. I am here because I am a domestic violence advocate after going through my own abusive marriage and safely getting out of that. I became a domestic violence advocate in my area. And was fortunate enough to get connected with Tia and the amazing work that she's doing. Currently, I'm working on a project called The Human Experience. It is a blog and podcast about how our experiences, our stories, define who we are. They define our principles and our values and how we see the world. So if you'd like to check that out, feel free to visit my website, getthehx.com. or follow me on Instagram at getthehx.
Thank you, Jen, so much. Sunny, please introduce yourself to Luv Bay.
Okay, hi everybody. Shalom Aleichem. How are you? I hope that everybody is well. Salam Aleichem and peace to all. My name is Sunny Epstein, and I am an Orthodox Jew. I've been observant my entire life. And in fact, I know this is airing at 7 o'clock on Friday night. I am actually observing Shabbat as you listen to this with my family. So I will not be able to answer questions directly. But if anybody wants or knows somebody that needs to hear this, please put them in contact with the folks here, and they will get it to me, and I will send you a recording. So I live in the Jewish community, and my own work is I am a text teacher. So for those of you that what that means is Torah, commentaries, Gemara, Mishnah, all of that. And what I really love to do is to bring the texts of our people properly understood and critical issues and individuals together. And in doing that, it takes me to a lot of topics across the board and learning on my own. In that context, I note that texts are often misused, abused, and misinterpreted and used for less than honorable purposes. And this is one of those areas where this, in fact, does occur. I myself, as someone who is in a leadership position in my community, know of many women, too many women, who have been the victims of domestic violence. And it's very difficult, to survive and then to thrive after that, especially in a community where there's a complicity of silence for many reasons. Mm-hmm. So through a variety of experiences, I have come into contact with these women. I myself have seen it. I have instructed my girls in terms of choosing mates, how to not confront it. And I'm aware of it from my own background.
Thank you so much, Sunny. We want to start with sharing some resources, actually, that Sunny graciously provided with us. So we want to start with sharing a few resources, and then we are going to go right into our topic. First, we have the Jewish Family and Children's Service. Their website is www.jfcsill.org. We have Home Shalom, which is a program that teaches teens and young adults about healthy relationships. Their website is www.theadvocate.org/home-shalom. That is THEADVOT project.org/home-shalom. And then we have the Jewish Coalition Against Domestic Abuse. Their mission is to support victims of domestic abuse to become empowered and obtain safe environments, to educate community professionals and others about domestic abuse and appropriate responses to it, and to also prevent future generations from suffering domestic abuse by raising awareness. Their website is www.jcada.org/Jewish-coalition-against-domestic-abuse. So listeners, with that, we would like to go into our topic for this evening, which is domestic violence in the Jewish community. And I would like to start by sharing a quick insert from a paper actually written by Sunny. And her paper, this is entitled Domestic Violence, the Secretive Suffering of Too Many Jewish Women. In our contemporary world, there is an internal reluctance to be honest about the shortcomings of religious communities. In the observant Jewish world, not unlike others of its type, there is a pervasive self-congratulatory sentiment that all lives as religious people are peaceful and loving and according to the highest standards of the faiths dictates all because they are observant Jews. While this is the preferred myth, unfortunately, the reality is too often far from this expressed ideal. While the words and texts of Jewish lore and life praise the woman profusely and value children greatly, it is important to be honest and transparent about the secret corners of this society. So, Sunny, we often talk about how domestic violence affects everyone, anyone and everyone, no matter your race, your religion, your gender, your financial status. So at this time, can you talk to us about how domestic violence affects those in the Jewish community?
Sure. So thank you so much, Tia, and thank you so much, Jen, for inviting me and for allowing me to be part of this discussion. So in terms of the Jewish community, clearly there are many, many texts that indicate that we should honor all people, including our wives, including our partners, including everyone around us. We are taught, and I will just share some Hebrew phrases for any listeners who may acknowledge them, but I am translating everything. Kol adam nivra b'tzelem Elokim. Every human being, every earthling is created in the image of God. And very shortly, for those of us that are in the Judeo-Christian tradition, know that Adam, who then becomes the name of the male, is told, Ezer Kenegdo, he must find a helpmate. He must find somebody that will help him in this world. And of course, then there are varying traditions about how Eve and Adam come to be. Some people go back even to that root and say that Chava, Eve, comes from the rib of Adam, therefore is completely dependent on Adam, therefore does not have any agency for herself. That is misunderstanding what the text is saying, because a lot of the Jewish commentaries point to the fact that because this part is taken out of Adam, out of the human being, the earthling, the man is incomplete without his partner, and that they come together in this partnership. So that's one example of a teaching that can be misused and abused. There are many, many statements about kibud chavercha kamo shalach or shalcha. The honor of your friend or of your partner must be as dear to you as your own honor. and this includes women. It should also be stated as an aside that all language in Hebrew is gendered. So a lot of people will take that in some ways properly to indicate gender distinctions, but in other ways take it inappropriately to allow for gender superiority. And what ends up happening is that in our community, too often, especially in the religious community, texts are invoked by male community members with whom male authorities will commiserate. Within this scheme of complicity, there is pressure to conform. This has proven to be profoundly damaging to women, children, and men, while severing family units and compromising communities and their integrity. So it hurts everybody. And this complicity of silence, this notion of setting it under the rug, it's not a problem here. And we have many problems in the religious Jewish community and in many traditional situations. Women observe laws of family purity. That is, during the menstrual cycle and for 7 clean days afterwards, we do not have relationships, intimate relationships with our husband. We go to the mikvah, we go to the ritual bath, and then resume those relationships. When properly used, it's a lovely way of keeping a family life fresh and the relationship intimate. It forces you to have interaction with your partner by speaking and doing other things, having nothing to do with bedroom intimacy for anywhere from 40 to 50% of every month, which has its own merit. I actually know some non-Jewish family therapists who use that with their couples to try to instill a better and more qualitative relationship. Unfortunately, also in the religious community, women are covered from, I'm modern Orthodox, so I don't necessarily have sleeves down to my wrists, but in the Orthodox community, there are women that are as covered as, for general populational understanding, say a Muslim woman who wears a full a burqa. Mm-hmm. Her face will be showing. We generally don't do that, though there are a few exceptions, but we generally don't do that. So the problem is that unless a man or a partner or a male hits someone right in the face, you can get away with a lot. And women will go to the ritual bath and are asked, where did you get those bruises? And of course, I fell down the stairs or whatever. And I have had women come to me and say, I'm being abused. What do I do? This is a major, major problem. In one instance, a woman had said to me specifically, my husband said he can do anything he wants, and no rabbinic court will touch him. Unfortunately, there have been such cases where women lose their children and all support and standing. One woman, and this happens often, but this was someone that I knew and someone that I was involved with, some years ago, to maintain her safety and protect her life, had to leave her family and literally walked away with nothing, presenting a whole set of secondary outcomes of the abuse she suffered, including finding a new society, a new community, a support system, living without her children, leaving her children to suffer from the abuse, and so on. So this goes on throughout the entire community. And the problem is that there are 6 factors that I will point to, and then I will stop at this moment for the next question or what have you. Mm-hmm. 1, there's a lot of focus on shalom bayit, on a peaceful home, and the woman is charged with maintaining that peaceful home. 2, there is this avoidance of lashon hara, of any language that could hurt anybody's reputation. So if a woman goes out and tells somebody that her husband is beating her, she is potentially damaging his reputation, his ability to do business, or what have you. 3, there's an emphasis on modesty, on sniut, of dress, character, use of one's voice, not to speak too loud. Women don't speak in front of men in many parts of the Orthodox community. They can't even state any opinions or thoughts or have any type of conversation of import. And this can be carried too far by pressuring women, and many do, to remain in their home and silent. And they are therefore, as you know, in domestic violence issues, one of the first red flags is isolation. And these women end up being isolated. Or there is complete separation of males and females during formative years. Separate schools, separate tables to eat at for some holiday observances. Everything is separate. They cannot talk with each other. We ourselves had an experience where our son was friendly with a little girl, and when the little girl got to a certain age, those parents did not want that friendship to continue anymore. So there's completely separate gendered socialization. And then what happens when the child is ready to get married, they call a matchmaker, a match is made, and all of a sudden you are in this intimate relationship with this other creature that you have been separated from your entire life. As a joke, a friend of mine says, and she has an amazing marriage and an amazing husband, and thank God they're a phenomenal couple, but she was matched this way. So she now writes, and she would never allow this to happen to her children, that it was her anniversary. And she said, I'm celebrating the day I used the worst process ever to make the best decision I could have made. So she's one of the lucky ones. But unfortunately, on the other side, I know, they meet in February. The contract, and this is a contractual arrangement, is signed in March. The marriage occurs in April. The separation due to abuse occurs in July, and then it takes 3 years to get a proper Jewish divorce that is replete with all kinds of abuse. 5, there is a suspicion of the outside world and people who do not look or act like us. There's even this notion from the Middle Ages that you cannot go to authorities, you cannot go to the police, you cannot go to local authorities or even local centers, because by doing that, you are taking something that's private and making it public. And then you go back to that idea of ruining reputation and all of that. And finally, there are limits on acceptable options for education. There is not sex education as we know it. Biology is very limited in a lot of these schools. Often these insular communities supervise their own schooling systems, and they don't even conform to the standards of the larger cultural setting. So there's all kinds of issues in the more religiously pitched community. In the less observant, or the communities that are not that insular and not that siloed, it's different. We don't have a lot of those problems, but there is still a lot of denial, a lot of we live a Jewish way of life, we don't have these problems. We, not so long ago, through our local domestic violence structure, tried to get synagogues of all types, those that are more observant, those that are less ritualistically observant, to post information about domestic hotlines. And there was an absolute reluctance to do that. We don't have that problem here. And they do have that problem here. And then the denial leads to shame. The individual thinks they're the only one. And they can't go to the resource center. And they can't go to support. So it just perpetuates itself in a very unhealthy way.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sunny. You just shared so much just in those few moments. I want to share another excerpt from your paper. And then I want to read this excerpt, and I want to ask you, with all of this that we know, with all of this that you've seen, I want to ask you, what is your hope? What is your desire? What do you want to accomplish? And again, from your paper, Domestic Violence, the Secretive Suffering of Too Many Jewish Women. The Jewish Women's Aid Study on Domestic Abuse is acknowledged as the largest survey of its kind, indicating that about 26% of Jewish women have experienced domestic abuse, indicating that this scourge is no less prevalent here than in the general population. There were a record of 103 new cases in the first 3 months of 2018, with this startling rise partially explained by increased awareness resulting in actual reporting. This represents an increase of 40% from the previous year. Within the strictly Orthodox community, the rate is marginally higher at 29%. To add dimension to this problem, JWA Chief Executive Naomi Dixon reports that recent research shows that Jewish women in abusive relationships generally wait more than 12 years, suffering abuse on 35 occasions, before making their first call. This can be even more protracted in the strictly religious community. Further, the impact of this problem is felt in all sectors of society, including the younger members of the community, who will grow up with a problematic view of relationships. So, and with that, Sunny, I ask you, with all that we know, with all that we're learning now, what do you sincerely hope to accomplish?
Okay, so in this, I'm going to share, Tia and Jen, some additional resources. I will give whatever links or information I can. In some cases, all you have to do, folks, is Google the names. So the first resource that I'm going to use is an amazing rabbi in the conservative Jewish movement who does a lot of work around ethics. And I want to just make a very quick statement here. And again, this is one of the pieces of Jewish gestalt that is misused and abused. Jewish law is very much based on ethical foundations. And there are many instances when issue A and issue B may come into conflict. When that happens, you always revert to basic ethical foundations: respect for life, pikuach nefesh, saving a life, not endangering somebody's life, those kinds of things. And decisions are made based on that. For example, when I said that Shabbat, our Sabbath, I do not use any electricity, we do not go anywhere in cars, we walk, we set everything beforehand, we don't change anything, and that's also true on a variety of our holidays. So we can live like that as much as a little bit more than 3 days, where everything is done ahead of time. However, we are taught, if I am walking to the synagogue and I see someone in distress, I go, I call an emergency number, I do what needs to be done to help them, because saving a life overrides everything else.
Yes.
So I want to say very clearly that in Jewish observance properly understood, ethics and law are not in conflict. There may be some complications and some issues, and they are negotiated through the Gemara, through our Talmud, through our Mishnah, through various sources. So I'm going to go to Rabbi Dorf for a moment, who makes a very compelling statement where he says that family violence is an unpleasant memory from our sources, those that are misunderstood and misused, and it afflicts present families. He talks about the idea of the prevalence of sexual abuse. 1 out of every 3 girls, 1 out of every 5 boys is sexually abused before age 18. And here we also have to look at same gender abuse as well, where, like what has been exposed in the church, the only reason that you all may not know as much about the Jewish community of abuse of our young boys or our young girls in these gender separated environments is because we're not as out there, or we're not as much of a concern regarding that as, for example, the Catholic Church. But we have that problem as well. Again, most of our folks are good people, just like most Catholic priests are good people, but we have our outliers and we have our folks that create problems. Beating wives or beating husbands or beating children any type is absolutely not acceptable. There are those rabbis in the past who would say, under certain circumstances, if a woman, again, speaks too loudly or crassly or disobeys her husband or doesn't do something that they're supposed to do, then it's okay to beat them, or it's okay to beat children. And again, a husband can refuse to give a wife a divorce because all contracts in Jewish law are done by males only. When I went to my wedding and had my ketubah, my Jewish wedding contract, I was kind of an observer. That's the way it goes. And the intent was that you have to remember our context today is so different. Let's look for just a moment at English property law and remember that until 1882, women were not, according to British law, allowed to own property. Why? Because according to Ben Griffith, who has studied this extensively, he said, there wasn't really discussion about equality of rights. The concern was much more about, quote, the potential discord if women become property owners. And they did not want to end what was called coverture, which was the wife was pretty much part of the husband's property. So this is not just something in this religious community or that community. This is something that culturally has been ingrained in our past, whether we're talking about our religion or ethnicity or the lands we come from or whatever it is. So this is the problem. In the 1200s to 1300s, Jewish scholars began to condemn wife beating in the strongest of terms. In fact, one rabbi said, wife beating is more serious of an offense than assaulting any other person because, and this is properly understood, in the marriage contract, a husband takes on a specific obligation to honor his wife beyond the normal obligations and even more than himself. I'll repeat that. In the marriage contract, a husband takes on the obligation to honor his wife beyond the normal obligations and even more than himself. And not all rabbis agree with this. There's a back and forth discussion where some say, for example, one rabbi said, how do you respond to a husband who's beating their wife? So the rabbi said, well, the wife should act better so that she doesn't deserve to be beaten. And again, this is, a different culture, a different time, which thank God, when we say we've come out of the dark ages, yes, we would like to think so, but unfortunately some of the problems of the dark ages haven't left us, and that's the problem. I will cite one example of something that I find fascinating. In 1995, a book was published by Rabbi Twersky, a very well-known rabbi in the Orthodox community. And I include this in my paper, so I will just read this from here. One modern text of suggested approach and resulting praxis to address the problem of domestic violence and all sexual abuse that combines Jewish foundational texts and principles with the reality it confronts us through vignettes of real cases is, and this is the title of a book, The Shame Born in Silence. You should like that name, Tia.
Yes.
The Shame Born in Silence by Rabbi Abraham J. Twersky, Twerski, He was a psychiatrist as well as a rabbi. And again, I highly recommend you Google it, The Shame Born in Silence by Rabbi Abraham J. Twersky. Now, here's the interesting part. The book was originally published in 1996. When the first version of this book became available in 1996, okay, that's less than 30 years ago. That's 26 years ago, right? There were so many intense negative reactions and threats that Rabbi Dr. Twersky had to avail himself of police protection.
Wow.
The book was then republished in 2015. At that point, 7 years ago, none of this occurred. And perhaps this is a sign of the progress we have made in beginning to acknowledge the reality of this problem and its impact on our community. In this and other books, Rabbi Twersky brings together his understanding as a Hasidic rabbi and a psychiatrist in formulating a most important discussion, not only about the problem of violence against women and the complicity of the larger Jewish community as enablers, but the critical importance of this toxic problem when everyone in the community. Now, we've come a little bit forward. We have, as I said earlier, Shalom Bayit is still maintained, and when any couple goes for counseling for a get, they are asked, are you sure this is, not reconcilable? Are you sure this isn't going to happen? and we're trying to get more. They recommend counseling. So there is more of an opening, again, not in the very, very, very right-pitched Orthodox community, but this has definitely seeped in to the Orthodox community where it's become more normative, along with the Reform, Reconstructionist, secular, humanist, conservative, and other iterations of Jewish expression. So this is a time where we are trying to address these issues. I will read a quote. Domestic violence does not end at the battered woman's doorsteps, but rather steps into society, permeating the woman's community. Community plays a crucial role in Jewish lives since religious observance of holidays and daily events dictate what one eats, when one works, and what one wears. In this way, observant Jews in particular are bound together since they live within close proximity. Remember, we don't drive. So our communities, we all live within geographic proximity to each other, to the synagogue, kosher stores, the ritual bath, and so on. The closeness of the Jewish community could translate into an environment ripe for gossip. And that is what they are trying to avoid. But in trying to avoid that, these other problems ensue. And this is written by Stacey Guthertz, who's done a lot of writing about this. So, hope. Many of our rabbinic voices are speaking up about a lot of these misuses and abuses. Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs of Great Britain, who died a few years ago, stated, as a community, we may no longer turn a blind eye or deaf ear to the problem of domestic violence. We must oppose those who practice it and offer practical help to those who suffer. That is why this is in Great Britain, for anyone who's there, and our rabbinates support the work of Jewish Women's Aid. Again, Google it, Jewish Women's Aid. Many Orthodox rabbinical authorities have become more vocal about this scourge and are calling on communities to make all members accountable for proper and honorable actions toward each other. There is a book that is called Women and Divorce, The Rebellious Wife, the Aguna. The Aguna is someone who cannot get a divorce, which is a major form of abuse, and the right of women to initiate divorce in Jewish law, a halachic solution. And this is written by a very important voice also in our Orthodox Jewish world, Rabbi Shlomo, Shlomo, Riskin, Riskin. So more and more rabbis are acknowledging this, and even the rabbis themselves, and this is one of the things that does give me hope as well, are saying to folks who will say things like, this isn't a problem in Israel. We don't have this problem. And of course, we do have this problem. And in fact, in Israel, there is an organization called Amen, A-M-E-N, Amen, a land where women heal, that has been headed up by Marva, M-A-R-V-A, Zohar, Z-O-H-A-R, which is strongly advocating for increased awareness in Israeli society, mandated reporting, and funds to support women, children, and all victims of such abuse. And again, the rabbinic authorities, just as you saw the difference between Rabbi Twersky's book in terms of the first date of publication and then the republication of it, is coming to terms with the fact that, yes, we do need to deal with this. So one aspect that has changed is we now have women who are what are called yoetzot halacha, advisors of halachic issues. So women who are abused or who are dealing with various things can go to other women for advice and for help. And those women develop relationships with rabbis that will be sympathetic to them. I have been actively involved in this respect, working with women who cannot get a divorce and advocating for them to the Beit Din, to the rabbinical court, so that they don't have to be embarrassed and share the details and what have you. The rabbinical court, the members of the court know me, I know them, they trust me, and I have brought several women to them and ended this status of aguna, which means chained, because again, remember, according to halacha, Jewish law, a man is the only one who can begin the process of divorce, can ask for divorce. A woman does not have rights to do that. But that is changing, and I will get to that in a moment. Another really important resource is the Jewish Organized Feminine Alliance, JOFA, J-O-F-A, has and this is the name of the material, Guide to Jewish Divorce and the Beit Din System. It was published in 2005, and it helps women make informed decisions as they negotiate getting a divorce from their abusive husbands. So a lot of these things are out there. Another wonderful resource is Rabbi Mark Dratch, D-R-A-T-C-H, is the founder of the Jewish Institute Supporting an Abuse-Free Environment. The abbreviation is J-SAFE, J-Jewish S-A-F-E, the Jewish Institute Supporting an Abuse-Free Environment. And also, remember what I said about the kids. How do they learn how to interact with each other? We had a very unfortunate situation where a community we were involved with, there was physical, sexual abuse of a little girl by a group of boys in a home of a rabbi. And the community bought into that cloak of silence. Don't touch the authorities, we'll take care of it. It was one of the things that pivoted us to move out of that community. One of the main things that pivoted us to move out of that community. When this happened, I said to my girls, you are no longer permitted, as they were, to go to anybody's house on Sabbath afternoon for socialization, to hang out with their friend. We had to know where they were going before Sabbath. We had to speak to the parents before Sabbath. I had to know the family personally, and they were not allowed to just go freely through the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. That was how we handled it, and then we moved. So for kids, this is a problem because, again, remember what I said about the schools and not having trust and silence and denial. So there's now an organization called Magen Yeladim International. Magen means guarding, Yeladim are children. So Guarding Our Children International, Magen, M-A-G-E-N, Yeladim, Y-E-L-A-D-I-M, International. It was founded in 2013. And its mission is educating children in Orthodox Jewish day schools about safety and vulnerability and avoidance of situations that can be problematic. Founder Debbie Fox says the purpose of this work is to create a safer community for our children through awareness and education at all levels of society. There are graded lessons for grades kindergarten through 5th grade. And I will also tell you in another area of my work, I personally am involved right now with a lot of Orthodox Jewish day schools, as well as non-Orthodox Jewish day schools, community schools as well, in dealing with how do we teach our children about sexuality in a way that is safe and caring and compassionate for everybody, regardless of gender or sexuality or whatever the issues are. So this is all happening. Finally, one of the things that is now happening in the Orthodox community as well, all non-Orthodox rabbis I know are requiring this, and many Orthodox rabbis as well. They are requiring a prenuptial agreement when a couple gets married, and this prenuptial agreement states with witnesses, with a Beit Din, that both parties to the marriage will not thwart the other for getting a divorce. Both parties for the marriage will fulfill all civil requirements, because this is another form of divorce. There are form of abuse, in divorce, where very religious men say, we don't recognize the civil authority, which again is going completely against Jewish teachings, because there is a major teaching that says, Dina din malchut dina, the law of the land is the law, and you don't get to break it. You can't embezzle, and you can't not pay taxes, and you can't. And unfortunately, there's all these guys in jail because they're doing it, and they're
Yeah.
They're telling you it's against Jewish law, and it's not. So what's happening is that these folks can now get a divorce, do what needs to be done. Everything is met because this is a form of financial abuse.
Yes.
Another form of abuse, very specific to the very Orthodox community, is again, there is a halacha, a Jewish law, misunderstood, out of context, all of that. Again, it was for the purposes of protection. Marriage was a very different situation. Women did not have agency for themselves. This is thousands of years ago. That says a man can betroth their 3-year-old daughter. In other words, a man can commit their 3-year-old daughter to marriage to whoever he decides. And we know that this is still practiced in many, many parts of the world and in many, many religious communities. And this is the root. This is where it comes from. So what has happened is there have been cases where a very religious man will say, okay, I'll give you your divorce, but I'm betrothing our 3-year-old daughter. So that's psychological abuse. That's against the girl. In other words, there's all these tricks that people can use, but we are hoping, our hope is that more and more rabbis are realizing these tricks, that more and more people are taking agency, that more and more people are going out and being part of the world and understanding that it's not good to be in this very siloed, very limited life, that there is protection in knowing your neighbors, in knowing who's around you, that we should not be suspicious of authority. And I do see a lot of movement in this direction. Again, going back to Rabbi Twersky's book, The Difference Between 1995 and 2007, and now we have programs of education in our schools. This is not to say that things don't still happen, but here's the difference. If you go to the Jerusalem Post, which is a well-known newspaper, and you say, domestic violence, you'll get lists and lists and lists of domestic violence occurrences. And you will notice a few things. You will notice, number one, that there is more reporting in more recent years. This is not because it's gone up. This is because there's more reporting.
Yes.
And there are more corridors of the society that are saying this is absolutely wrong, and this is outrage, and I will not have this. So that outrage, education of our kids, prenups before marriage. Another thing to do is remember the story about the woman who met somebody in February, got engaged in March, married in April. Is I always tell my friends in the Orthodox community, I say to them, you're much nicer parents than I am. I always told my kids, don't even come to me to talk to me about an engagement until I see proper degree from 4-year university or college. And don't even talk to me about wanting to marry someone until you've known them at least a year. So fortunately, my children have been very, very obedient and have listened to me. And I have amazing children-in-law. So I do believe there is hope. I do believe there are places to go. I do believe that certain things are not tolerated. The one part of the community that I do worry about is the one that just stays siloed. And we all have that. We have that in our extreme Christian communities and our extreme Muslim communities. Unfortunately, that's the hardest nut to crack, I think.
Yeah. Sunny, thank you so much for all that you have shared. Luv Bay, we want to welcome you again to Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We are here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern with the replay on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern and also 7 p.m. Also Thursdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Luv Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. I would like to share one more resource that Sunny provided for us, and then Jen, if you have a question or comment, we'll go to you. Project Sarah, Stop Abusive Relationships at Home. It's a program that works to overcome cultural, legal, and religious barriers confronting victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse. While Project Sarah has served the statewide New Jersey Orthodox Jewish community for the past 18 years, no one is turned away due to race, gender, or financial difficulties. They are funded by the New Jersey Department of Law, Public Safety, U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Violence Against Women, New Jersey Department of Children and Families, Jewish Family Service, Children's Center of Clifton Passaic, and private donations and foundations. Their website is jfsclifton.org/Project Sarah. Again, their website is jfsclifton.org/Project Sarah. And with that, Jen, we turn it over to you.
Can I just add one very quick note, Tia?
Yes.
So the two JFCS references that we have made are, one is in Philadelphia, one is in New Jersey. What I would ask that everybody do is find out what your JFCS, what your Jewish Family and Children's Service, what iteration of that is local, is near you. Also, sometimes you can get to domestic violence resources through them, and sometimes you can get to them through general domestic violence resources. So don't feel like you only have to go to Jewish resources. If you call, for example, we have a situation here where I live, where we have Laurel House, and if people call Laurel House and through a series of questions, if they find out that it's somebody who's a religious Jew or a religious Muslim, they will send those folks directly to me in the case of a religious Jew, or to my wonderful friend and colleague Rachel Baldi if it's a religious Muslim.
Yes.
So notice, and if you contact a local place somewhere else, they will also help you find something that's closer to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for adding that. And also, Rachel Baldi will be on our program in the coming months. So,
Great.
Sunny, thank you so much for everything. I'm running through questions in my head, and I feel like you've pretty much answered a lot of them because your information has just been so comprehensive, and I really appreciate that. I guess the one thing is kind of two-part. The one thing that I was curious about is within the, addressing domestic violence within the context of a different culture, I think is really important. And so, what somebody who is not religious at all, very secular, and that can run the gamut to obviously very extreme religious, what domestic violence looks like is going to be very different because you have different practices. And so respecting a culture and how a culture chooses to address that issue, as long as it's being addressed, I think is very important. So if you could speak to that a little bit, and then I was also curious about, you kind of mentioned multiple things throughout, so I feel like I almost know the answer to this, but how is non-physical domestic violence addressed in the community?
Very good. So I'm going to give you another resource. This is a book by Susan Forward, Forward. It is called The Men Who Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them. Mm-hmm. And it is about what we will call, for lack of a better term, white-collar abuse. It's the emotional abuse, the psychological abuse. I'm going to take your child's passport so that you can't take them anywhere. Mm-hmm. And if you do, you'll never see them again. It's this notion that, and this is something that I'm also very aware of, that if you can take down a woman who is of repute, someone who has a doctorate, someone who's intelligent, someone who's a rock star out, hey, man, that's a huge notch in your belt. So that's one thing that needs to be said. Number two, there are men who are abused as well. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think happens is in the insular community, unfortunately, when there is physical violence or physical abuse, it's really horrible because of this cloak of silence. There's actually a video that was put out by the educational program that I mentioned, Magen Yeladim, about let's sweep it under the rug. Let's just, keep sweeping the dust under the rug. And that just doesn't work. In the less observant Jewish communities, it has to do with observance. It has to do with understanding law. It has to do with having a sense of what's what. In in the religious Jewish world, we cover our heads. Married women cover their heads. Men wear their kippot, their yarmulkes, or a hat sometimes as well. And I always say glibly, I never read anywhere, and I'm pretty good with Jewish texts, I never read anywhere, and you shall cover your head and go brain dead. It just doesn't work that way. But it seems that people like that. And looking at what's going on in this country, and looking in the United States, and looking at what's going on in the world, and how people are retreating to these extremes. And a Christian pastor wrote, when somebody leaves Christianity, they're not leaving the church, they're not leaving God, they're not leaving Jesus, they're not leaving your community, they are not leaving the Bible. They're leaving an individual who misrepresented all of it to them. And I think that is the bottom line. I think that tends to be more of the case in the more Orthodox community, whereas in the least observant or the lesser observant communities, or the more enlightened communities, whatever you want to say. And when I say observant, I mean ritualistically involved. I think you can be not necessarily ritualistically involved and very religious. And then I see people that are very ritualistically religious, but I wouldn't call them religious. And it goes back to those fundamental values. In other words, it's great that you're keeping kosher. It's great that you're keeping the Sabbath, but why are you doing it? And what are you supposed to learn from it? And if you don't take the lessons that is there to teach you about humility and being discreet and being, honoring others and realizing you don't know all truths and you can't be self-serving, then what is the point? So I don't think you have those issues in the more, in the non-Orthodox world as much. I do think that if you take those that are very conservative politically and those that are very right to the right and those that, don't think it's terrible when a president makes a totally inappropriate comment about women, I think that's where you will find a lot of the same kinds of dynamics. I will say also, Jen, that in the Middle East, all right, we were going to have a conference in Saudi Arabia, whole other discussion. We're not. We're meeting at Nazareth College in New York. But I had a meeting with the chief rabbi of Saudi Arabia, and he made a very interesting point. He said to me, we've become a bit more modernized, but we're not more westernized. I mean, everything is seen as very kind of, packaged or color blocked or whatever. So when you get to Israel, when you get to those, parts of the world, the Arabic culture, yes, I said Arabic culture because that is what it is very different than the Western culture. Very quick example. We're in Israel all the time. In fact, we're going in a few weeks. Yay. And so up until, a certain amount of years ago, when you would go out and you would go out to dinner, you would always see men at one table, women at another table. You would very seldom see mixed tables. This was not just religious people. This was completely secular people because that's their society. We noticed about 15 years ago, interesting, 2007, the second printing of the book, people didn't freak out. Right around that time, right, 2005-ish or whatever, I said to my husband, Ken, we're walking down one of the boulevards, Ben Yehuda and Yerushalayim, for those that know it, and also the Tayelet in Tzfat. And I said, do you notice something? Look at all the mixed tables. We haven't seen that before. So I think cultural context is important. I think that has to be put on the table. I think socioeconomic, all of this. There's so many issues. I think all of these issues are very complicated Venn diagrams. And you have to look at all the factors that are contributory to what's going on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, ladies. We are just under the hour. And Sunny, I would be remiss if I did not mention that you are also an author. So if you would please tell Luv Bay about your book and where it can be found before we go.
Okay, great. So my book is called Life Journeys, Stepping Forward, Stepping Backward, Moving Forward. And what it is, and it's available on Amazon, so I'll say that again since I messed it up the first time. Life Journeys, Stepping Backward, Moving Forward. It's a cheerleading book for religion. It shows us that religion asks us, and everything is in there. Christianity is in there. Buddhism is in there. Hindu teaching. More Judaism than others, just because of I am who I am. And also because a lot of the Christian and Muslim teachings are rooted in Jewish sources originally. So it's all about how we don't misuse, how we build community, how we are inclusive, how we show respect for each other, and grounding that in our teachings.
Thank you so much. So, ladies, we are at that time to give our final comment. So, Jen, I would ask you first what you would like to leave the listeners with, and then, Sunny, you can close us out for the evening. Jen?
Yeah, again, I just want to thank you, Sunny, for your time and your expertise, because it truly is expertise. I learned so much today, and I'm just really grateful for that. Just for you to be open and share your resources and your time with us. I think that it will help a lot of people, especially because, you talked very specifically about the Jewish community, but it rings true for anybody that practices religion, and especially anybody that's in a very conservative sect of religion. And, we need more voices talking about this. So I really appreciate you, and thank you.
Thank you. Sunny, your final words for our listeners.
So Minister Tia and Jen, thank you so much for asking me to do this. And yes, Jen, it is in other societies for sure. I do watch these things and look for information. There is presently a documentary on Netflix. It's a 4-part documentary about the FLDS and Warren Jeffs. And I believe it's called Keep Sweet and Pray or something like that. But it is horrifying. And yes, God's word is God's word. We are mere mortals. And someone who says they know exactly what God's word is, I'm not listening to that person. I don't care what religion. And I think we all have to remember that God wants each of us to be the best we can, made in the image of God, and always reflecting the heart of God, or whatever source anyone believes in that's greater than all of us. Thank you all.
Thank you. Luv Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes from the program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. We want to thank you for joining Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. We are rising out of the ashes together, Luv Bay. Good evening.